Welcome, welcome. No, thank you. You're too kind. Thank you for the applause. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Wallace, and I am the restaurant scientist. Welcome to Hidden Figures Podcast, Behind the Numbers with the Restaurant Scientist. In this show, we take an in-depth look into the economics of food service in the restaurant industry. The show objective is to examine economic disparities and inequalities impacting blacks in food service and the restaurateurs. We make a distinction between food service and restaurateurs because restaurateurs are independent operators, where the food service industry, you have the larger corporate operations. Today, I'm proud to introduce my two guests as both friends and colleagues. Our first guest is Melissa Fleischut, President and CEO of the New York State Restaurant Association. Melissa, welcome to the show. And my next guest is Chip Wade, President of Union Square Hospitality Group. Chip, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Yes. So I know my listeners heard me say friends. So yeah, Chip and Melissa and I go back 20 plus years to the early 1990s, late 90s. I joined the New York State Restaurant Association as a board member in late 99, 98, somewhere around 2000. And I've been associated with the Restaurant Association ever since. The association is an advocacy group on behalf of restaurateurs for the entire state of New York. They are part of the larger conglomerate, which is the National Restaurant Association. The National Restaurant Association deals with national level issues and advocacy work, while each individual state has its own state organization. Melissa and I met. I was board member, and then I became the treasurer, and then I became the vice chairman. And I'm proud to also say, which is kind of, I'm tired of all these first. I was the first African-American chairman of the New York State Restaurant Association, and that was at the 75th year, I believe, right, Melissa? So I was proud of that. Obviously, it was the first, I think, and Melissa can correct me, first black chairman, first black treasurer, first black vice chairman. And then Melissa came on as the first female president and CEO, I believe. So I'm very proud to call Melissa a friend and a colleague. I have tremendous respect for her and our work at the Restaurant Association. And same goes with Chip Wade. Chip Wade and I met when I first came out of culinary school. He was with Red Lobster at the time, and I had created an organization called the Black Culinarian Alliance, and we used to have dinners at Tavern on the Green, 6 courses, all done by a different chef, different black chefs. And Chip was one of my, early supporters. He came in with Red Lobster, and they supported me, from day one. And I've always been appreciative of that. And again, proud to, call Chip my friend, as well as a colleague. So I'd like to open up the questioning to Melissa first. Melissa, first, tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and who you are.
Sure. So thank you, Jason. I grew up in upstate New York. I've been a New Yorker for most of my life. Went to college here in the Albany area at Union College and was a political science major. That is my passion, my love is advocacy. So ended up in Washington, D.C. to get my master's degree at George Washington University and got my first job in an advocacy role at the National Restaurant Association. So fresh out of grad school, I ended up as an intern in their government affairs department and quickly got a full-time position there in their state relations division. And I worked there for about 4 years in the mid 90s. And it sounds like we came to NYSWRA at about the same time. I came to the New York State Restaurant Association in very late 98 and have been here ever since doing, for those of you who do anything with the nonprofit world, you wear multiple hats all the time. And I wore multiple hats all the time. So I started in membership and quickly moved over to government affairs. And then I got very involved with the board of directors as what we call the corporate secretary, which is probably a lousy name, but had a lot to do with board leadership. And then as the board identified me as a future leader, became vice president, chief operating officer, and then CEO in 2013. Believe it or not, I'm actually the third CEO female,
Is that right?
female CEO at the New York State Restaurant Association. I was shocked to learn that when we dug up the history, but the New York State Restaurant Association has been around since 1935.
Okay.
And the first two CEOs were female CEOs.
Wow.
So very surprised that
Yeah.
back in 1935 and in the 40s and early 50s, we had two female CEOs.
Excellent.
Prior to Fred Sampson and then Rick Sampson.
Got it. Again, I'm very passionate about the association, so my deep involvement behind the scenes with the Restaurant Association, when I was treasurer, vice chairman, and chairman, I actively attempted to get black restaurateurs to join the association. Many of them weren't aware that the association even existed, and then when I explained to them the benefits that the association does on their behalf, whether they're members or not, you know, the Restaurant Association, New York State Restaurant Association, is out there lobbying on behalf of all restaurants, whether they are members or not. And I had a difficult time convincing black restaurateurs to actually join the association. So today's discussion, Melissa, I'd kind of like for you to talk about, one, the agenda, the mission of the association, and two, more importantly, going forward, how do we get black restaurateurs engaged in the Restaurant Association, and what does the Restaurant Association need from the community to help them help them?
Well, and as proud as I am that you were our first chairman of color and, you know, broke through that role in the association, I'm embarrassed that it took us that long to get there. And that's why I think this conversation is so important. We recently had our member summit of our membership in Canandaigua just a week and a half ago. And I got asked that question, you know, why isn't there more board leadership? Why aren't there more people of color serving on our board of directors? And honestly, my answer is that it does go back to the membership. When we don't have that segment of the industry represented, when we don't have people participating at the membership level, it's very hard to get them into a leadership position. So we need to do a much better job reaching out and just finding out what it is that the New York State Restaurant Association maybe isn't providing or isn't doing to reach our audience across the state. So we're really focused on trying to help restaurateurs succeed, and we don't make any distinction between who those restaurateurs are. Our membership is inclusive. Like you said, the word food service is the word that you choose to use over restaurant for owners and operators. And, you know, we have food trucks, pizzerias, delis, fine dining, caterers, hotels. We have a wide selection of restaurants that are part of our organization. Yet we do not do a great job reaching people of color and what they consider to be minority populations. So I think that that's the question for me. And the question for our membership is, how do we do a better job reaching that community? Are we not providing a member value proposition that means something in that community? You know, we talk about how we advocate on behalf of the industry. We have money saving programs. We have educational programming to grow your business, and we provide training to help protect your restaurant. So those are the things that we normally talk about, but maybe that's not resonating with the right audience, or maybe we're just not presenting ourselves in a way that is appealing to those restaurant owners and operators. And like you said, one of our biggest challenges has always been across all restaurant communities, those people who just don't know we're there, and don't know that we exist or what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. The show is called Hidden Figures Behind the Numbers. So share with my listeners the number of restaurants that are in the state and any additional data that you can share versus how many members you have and what are some of the areas that have the largest concentrations of independent restaurateurs.
Sure. So we are roughly 50,000 eating and drinking place establishments across the state of New York. Large concentration is in New York City, about 27,000 in New York City alone. We are a $51 billion industry in a normal year, a non-COVID year,
Right.
for sales to the state of New York. And we typically employ close to 660,000 people. That was our pre-COVID number. 660,000 employees. We're still down about 220,000 employees right now,
Right.
due to the pandemic, but that would be our typical numbers.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to come back to you and we're going to drill down more on membership and dues and savings and things of that nature. I want to switch over to Chip now. Again, to my listeners, Chip Wade is the president of Union Square Hospitality Group. And Chip, for you at the food service, the executive food service level, when I say food, I mean, again, I'm meaning larger unit operations, whether they're chains, whether they're franchises, or independently operated, self-operated organizations. Talk to me, Chip, about your career path as well as the opportunities that exist at the executive level for blacks in food service, and what are some of the titles, the job descriptions, and the qualifications?
All right. First of all, again, thank you, Jason. Delighted to be on this podcast with you and Melissa. Real quick with regard to my background, I've been fortunate and blessed. I entered this industry like many at the age of 15. I got my first job at a fast food restaurant, a Dunkin' Donuts restaurant outside of Philadelphia. Okay. Right. And so, like many in our industry, I had a boss who became a big brother and a mentor to me. And on his counsel, I dove deep into this industry and went to culinary school. So culinary school at Johnson & Wales, love food, love passion, love talking about food. Went on to get a bachelor's degree at a small private school outside of Philadelphia called Widener University. And then I have a master's degree from the University of Texas at Dallas. As a young man, after my graduation from college, my bachelor's degree, I joined and grew up in the TGI Fridays family, right? 1985, Fridays was a dominant player, albeit somewhat small, clearly significantly smaller than what they are today. But in terms of the bar and grill, they are pretty much the granddaddy, the very first kind of bar and grill. And so I grew up in TGI Fridays, spent the better part of 14 years with TGI Fridays, not just in restaurant operations, but I spent 5.5 years of my professional career in HR. And then I spent 2 years with TGI Fridays in the development, so real estate acquisition, design, and construction. I left TGI Fridays, had a wonderful career, actually 2 tours of duty with Darden Restaurants. I joined Olive Garden in 1999 and later moved on to another brand of Darden's called Smoky Bones in 2001, where I was the senior vice president of development. I spent 2 years of my professional career at a storied Boston brand at Legal Seafoods as their chief operating officer before rejoining the Red Lobster brand in 2006, initially as a zone VP and then later became the EVP and head of operations for North America.
Wow.
And then in 2019, what a wonderful opportunity for me to join this highly regarded, highly respected company called Union Square Hospitality Group, which, as many of your listeners no doubt probably are aware, was founded by Danny Meyer. So did you have a follow-up?
No, go ahead. I'm listening. This is exciting.
So you're talking about, one of the questions you had for me is, the opportunities for Blacks, African Americans, and I would say people of color. Listen, at the senior level, I think our industry, candidly, has not done a very good job. Okay. There are a handful of restaurant companies that's both at the fast food, fast casual, and casual that kind of stand out. But generally speaking, sadly, for women and for people of color, there is a significant lack of presence at the senior level. When I talk about the senior level, I'm talking VP and above.
Okay.
And it is obviously something that is near and dear to my heart. I get excited about the future prospects and where we're headed. I get saddened and, quite frankly, a little pissed off at the lack of women, the lack of Blacks in key senior leadership positions. So we have a long journey ahead of us.
Yes. So let's drill down on that. The show is called Behind the Numbers. And what I'm hoping to accomplish is to begin this type of candid conversation about how do we make sure that by the time we reach 2025, you and I can say that hopefully we have started something that we can quantify and say, okay, Chip, we come back in 2025, you say, well, what do those numbers look like now? And having said that, talk to me specifically about what you think the solution is and how someone might learn about the career options that are available to those college students that are either in business or finance school or either in law school or going to college for human resources. What's the message? What's the career path? Like, what do you do as president? Like, what is that? I mean, you threw out a lot of names and titles, but what did you actually do in those positions that we can summarize quickly? Obviously, in this little short podcast, maybe we need to do a second episode. But at some point in time, I want to talk specifically about what's the solution. How do we start driving people to even know that these jobs are available?
Sure. So the solution requires two entities, if you will, to work in a collaborative way. So it requires the current chairmen, CEOs, heads of HR of restaurant companies. But the other entity, as you noted, is the college students, the professors, and the guidance counselors, right? And so for me, I think about the college student. I always advise college students and graduate students really to focus on the fundamentals of business, of knowing finance, of knowing accounting, of knowing statistics, which, again, being very, very transparent, is not an area historically where Blacks and women kind of have sat historically, right? And so really understanding the head side of the restaurant. The head side is the financial numbers. The heart side is the passion, it's the people, it's the art. Remember, I talked about, and you know this, you went to culinary art school, right? And so what I try to educate and inform young adults is this simple notion of balancing both the head and the heart. But the head is really, really important because it drives success. And so I was literally on a call yesterday with a young lady who attends FIU in Florida.
Okay.
And my counsel to her was get very comfortable in finance, in strategy and statistics and accounting.
Got you.
The second piece of advice, Jason, and you were asking a little bit about, my background, which is be open and curious to new opportunities. And at the age of 27, I assumed that my career was solely going to be in operations. But someone came to me, I've been restructured, I've been downsized, and said, in essence, we need you to move into HR. I had no choice in the matter. But I quickly had to pivot and be receptive to this idea of being in a discipline that was completely foreign to me. And so what I would say to that is to the listeners, to the students, is be very open, be very curious, maintain this unquenchable thirst for knowledge of all things related to the hospitality business. And when you do that, these opportunities to become vice presidents and then presidents, I believe, will present themselves.
Okay. Excellent. I'm going to come back to you, but just so you know where I'm going to go with the next level is, then reality sets in, right, Chip? So then, I remember being a line cook and not being able to get an opportunity to be a sous chef because I was told that I need to be a line cook for 5 more years, meaning while I saw my white counterparts, getting sous chef jobs. So I want to come back to you and talk to you about, did you experience any of that? And then more importantly, going forward, what should someone do when they encounter, the real, underlining bias and racism with their bosses,
Sure.
within the industry. So I want to bounce back to Melissa and talk in reference to the association, Melissa, and where the conversation is now. How can my listeners or independent restaurateurs help the association accomplish, or if your 2021 plan, or even establish a plan? Like, is there some type of coalition? Is there something that you guys planning on launching that will get that information and that feedback directly from the listeners in a post-COVID world about going forward and helping the fabric? Because I'm seeing in Harlem and in Brooklyn, 50% of the restaurants may not come back. So obviously, if that's impacting all restaurateurs, it has a greater impact on Black-owned businesses and Black-owned restaurateurs. You want to speak to that a little bit, please?
Sure. So one of the things that we are putting in place is a task force to specifically address our real lack of diversity in the membership.
Got you.
And to do that, one of the things that we think we have to do is that task force needs non-members. It needs people that we've never reached before. So I would encourage anyone listening that would want to help us develop our plan and shape our plan for 2021 to, really reach a different level of concentration in the membership, would be to engage with us. Our website is nisr.org. You can email us at info@nisr.org. But I would welcome members and non-members to engage with us so that we can have this conversation and understand better what is it about the New York State Restaurant Association that isn't reaching the right audience. Is it that price, like you said, is that an issue? We have a Rochester chapter that's trying to address that and provide subsidized membership to reach out into the community and get more people engaged. I don't know if that's the issue. Mm-hmm. Our lowest membership rate is $3.95. Maybe that's too high. I really don't know the answer to that.
Wow.
I think we provide really good value for that, but we have to sell you on the value. We have to convince you that we have that value there for you to invest in our organization. And then, just trying to understand, is there something that we don't provide that maybe we should? Financing is one of the things, Jason, that you and I have talked about a lot. The Absolutely. Opportunity to finance your restaurant, to seek out investors, right. To get people willing to believe in your dream and invest in your dream. It's not an area the Restaurant Association typically engages in or even provides educational programming around. But maybe that's a way for us to engage in a different conversation than we have before to provide opportunity on this path.
Absolutely. And to piggyback on that, the ability to have restaurateurs, as Chip mentioned, to separate the passion from the mind, right? Emotional intelligence. We go to culinary school, or we're entrepreneurs and we're passionate about our concept, our vision, our food. And many times that passion is leading you in the wrong direction from profitability. Return on investment is not a hobby. This is a business that needs the return investment to its individual investors, whether they're friends, families, or outside entities. What I would like to see, Melissa, and I don't know if this is possible, and we spoke about this before, is, the alliance between Chase Bank or Wells Fargo or the SBA at the state level that now allows these pots of money to come through the association and then trickle down, so that these restaurateurs need more than just money and capital. They need resources. And many times they might not even know they need these resources, something as Chip stated before. Do you understand the balance sheet, which I think is more important than the income statement, because that's really where an investor is going to see the value in the assets and the liabilities in the owner's equity to kind of see how profitable this operation is, so that a bank could lend on tangible assets. So if the association has some type of plan for that or wants to engage in that type of conversation, even Chip, I don't know if there's some type of joint collaboration. I know you guys may be dealing with the National Restaurant Association because you have restaurants in probably every state, but the access to capital. And Chip, you did this to me 25, 30 years ago. You didn't just write me a check from my organization. You kind of gave me access to you, which then is more than just money. I need access to other resources that I don't have, which could be consultants or accountants or investors, which is also part of the success, particularly for independent restaurants. So again, Melissa, this is for you. We're going to talk specifically about independent restaurants, and are any of those initiatives on your radar?
Yeah, so I definitely think that we're looking at more educational opportunities around financing, because again, there's just so much information that's needed to be processed right now as to how to successfully manage your restaurant. Like, it was really hard before COVID.
Right.
Now it's super hard.
Exactly.
So we are looking at that and trying to come up with programming for 2021 as we set our calendar that looks at more of the funding and financing side of the industry, where we haven't probably provided that previously. And you challenged me to find some numbers for you, and it was much harder than I thought. Looking at some of the numbers and trying to drill down as to what they meant. I did find a pretty decent website that I was utilizing. Untapped New York and untappedcities.com was providing some information about restaurant ownership. And I was a little bit interested in this too. And I don't know if you want to get into it, but you mentioned Brooklyn. Brooklyn is considered to have one of the largest communities of Black-owned restaurants in the state. And I was a little surprised when I read about the Bronx. They have a breakdown of each borough, actually, for New York City.
Okay.
The Bronx is considered to have roughly 44% of their population is either Black or African American as they identify. Yet they only have a few dozen independent restaurants. They have chain restaurants. So again, are they franchised by Black owners or African American owners?
Interesting.
Or in like why that dynamic?
Yeah,
I don't know. I found that pretty interesting when I was trying to dig up some numbers on this, because it is really hard to find these numbers.
Yeah, they don't. No one's. They're not being collected, which is a whole nother conversation that I had the CIA. And what they told me? It was like, well, that sounds like a doctorate program that you need to begin. I'm like, I just got my master's degree. Now you're trying to push me into a doctorate program and doing this research. But the research is not out there. And so we do need to start collecting it. I'm not a research person, but, we can have this conversation about what we need to put together something in Chip as well. If you guys, if we want to do it together. But we do need to start collecting this specific information about these regions so that we can really understand that as gentrification happened in Brooklyn and Harlem, do we really understand how many restaurants was in Charlie Rangel's district in 1995 versus how many Black-owned restaurants are in his district now? So that's let's continue this conversation.
It's a good conversation. Sorry, Jason.
No,
without the data, we can't move forward.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You're just going by gut and intuition.
Yep.
And that hasn't served us well over the past 45, 50 years.
It has not. So what I want to do is try to put together, again, the resources. I see, large corporations giving money to Black Lives Matters and save, support Black restaurants and, support Black business. I see a lot going on, which is great. And I want to continue that. But we also need to start collecting real data that we can use and measure results, as well as really strategically, put out a GPS roadmap for the future, for the next generation of food service professionals.
One of the details I found, Jason, which I thought was kind of interesting too, was that there's a little nugget of information that said that the African American owned restaurants had increased 49% between 2007 and 2012. That was nationwide. That wasn't just New York.
Okay.
First of all, my question would be, why is that information so old? Like, why are we looking at 2007 to 2012? But then again, 49% increase is great if we knew what we had started with, and if we knew what that ended with. Like, if it went from 10 to 20, that's not great.
That's exactly.
What are we talking about in terms of those numbers? And there was no detail given about that just snippet of information. So I think we all have to do a much better job trying to ask for this information, collect it, and analyze it, because that in and of itself doesn't tell us too much. Right.
No, absolutely. It is funny. I had this conversation with my beloved CIA. I told you, we just had 2 black instructors hired up there. And, quite to their defense, black chefs were not applying for culinary jobs at the Culinary Institute of America. But I told them, I said, well, we just increased your black your faculty membership by 200%, right? So if I throw that number out there, 200% is great, but it was like, yeah, we got 2 people. So when you look at the absolute dollar, the absolute value versus the relative value, right? You said 46%, could only been like 10 restaurants, which is not that big of big of an accomplishment, but it is an accomplishment. So again, the idea here, let's move the conversation forward, and let's talk about ways of bringing solutions to these problems. Chip, anything you want to add based upon the previous conversation before we come back to some more data specifically about career opportunities, compensation, and what does someone do when reality smacks them in the face and they're not given opportunities at the corporate level? Because technically the corporate world doesn't have a good reputation amongst African Americans and Hispanics and Latinos for, advancement. My son's called the corporate slave shit. You know what I mean? It's like, I ain't down for that corporate slave shit. It's like, well, that's their perception. How do we change that perception? And what's your recommendation going forward of when someone encounters, racism?
Listen, I think I'd say a couple of things, right? Racism exists, obviously, not just in our industry, but in our world, right? Yeah. And so the advice for me to them, anyone, is to make sure that that you are leading in a proactive manner, right? To be anti-racist, that by both your words and your actions, your voice, your behavior is being shown, demonstrated. My advice also is to make sure that you are educating not only yourself, but others around you, right? And education is a powerful tool, both for those who may be racist, but also for those who feel oppressed, right? It's kind of getting education. I may take us down a slippery slope. I promise I won't. But one of the issues facing America, and by definition, maybe facing our industry, is a lack of understanding of the history, right? It's the history of racism in America, and maybe the history of racism in our industry. And so, again, this is repetitive. My counsel is education is a powerful tool, and we owe it to ourselves and our community to get smarter, brighter, wiser.
Absolutely. In terms of those executive level jobs you told me about, what does one need an agent at certain point in time do you go through a headhunter? And then give me an idea of the salaries and compensations at, entry level, executive level, mid-level, executive level, and then, executive level.
Yeah. So, man, there's a lot to unpack there, right? I would say one definitely needs an advocate, right? If
Okay.
you're in corporate America, which is where the majority of my background is, right? Big chains of Fridays, Olive Garden, Red Lobster, right? You certainly need an advocate and a champion, be they white or black, who is that believes in you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was fortunate to have a white leader at TGI Fridays who gave me my first, second, third, and fourth chance.
Okay.
He also kicked me in my keister when I didn't perform.
Right.
So you need a champion and advocate for sure. The
Right.
individual has to get results, right? And you mentioned this earlier, Jason. You could be passionate about the industry. You could love the people that you're managing. But if you fail to deliver results, you will not get promoted. That's not a black thing or a woman thing. That's a business thing.
Right.
As a leader once said to me, the bankers who loan you your money, they don't care if you're Asian or white or black. The most important color to them is green. And so, one, I would say make sure you have an advocate. Two, make sure that you deliver results. And then number three is I often talk about this leadership competency that I think is absolutely crucial, which is an agile, or this notion of being,
Conductor.
agility,
Agile, yeah.
right? This agile leadership. So, a change agility. I think about results agility. I think about mental agility, right? Is the person curious to a fault? Are they comfortable with ambiguity and complexity? All of those things, which are the cornerstone of the restaurant and the hospitality industry.
Okay.
So that's kind of part A. Now, with regard to salaries, right? So, at the multi-unit, let's start there. So a director of operations for a fast casual or casual chain, you're talking about a base salary where you're probably in the 115 to 125 range.
Okay.
With a bonus potential that could be, an additional $25,000 to $50,000.
Okay.
So, we're talking about adult money, right? This is real money if you are able to ascend to that multi-unit director of operations or regional manager. That's at the high end, and that's in the casual dining. If you're a multi-unit for Burger King or McDonald's in the fast food, it's probably going to be less.
So less.
Right? I think when you start to move up and you think about a zone VP, then you're talking about a base salary in the 175. It might go up to as high as 215. And then you've got not only a short-term bonus, which could range between 40 and 60,000, but then you're also talking about kind of a long-term incentive plan that could come in the form of stock, phantom stock, or some sort of equity.
Got it.
And so the numbers I just shared with you, of course, are dependent upon the scale and scope of the enterprise and the scale and scope of the financial responsibility that the leader is responsible for.
Got you. Can you give us a high-level overview of what your day looks like? What do you do? What do you oversee?
Yeah. So I can give you a high overview pre-COVID and post-COVID, right?
Okay.
So clearly, as Melissa noted, right, the world has changed significantly. And I would submit to you and your listeners that my work in a post-COVID, in a COVID world is significantly different. In general, my world is about surrounding myself with really competent, confident leaders around me. That's in the various disciplines that report into me: marketing and chief financial officer, chief people officer, right? It's about building a very, very strong, again, I use the phrase, very competent, confident team. My role is also to partner with Danny, the founder and entrepreneur, on strategy and direction. Right. And so that's everything from how we think about starting a new concept, our work that we have to do on an emerging concept. We have a brand within our portfolio called Daily Provisions. And it is a 3-meal kind of neighborhood restaurant with fantastic food in a chef environment, but a small prototype. We have 2 open, and and 2 more to go.
Mm-hmm.
So we're thinking about the growth opportunities for that brand. My work also requires us, me, Danny, and I to think about new opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's with our Union Square event business or with an individual restaurant. And then I would say the other thing that I'm intimately involved in is tied to the thing I just said, which is, weighing in on negotiations as we think about moving into a new project or negotiating with our current partners that we have. So the thing that I would add now in the COVID environment is elevating my presence and my voice around the human side of our industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, as a result of COVID and then the closure and shutdown of New York City, we were forced back in March to lay off north of 2,200 hourly employees and managers.
Wow.
And so now we have a couple of business up and running. And so I'm engaged with staying very close with our chefs and GMs specifically,
Mm-hmm.
and then making plans to start to bring some of those employees and leaders back on board as we open more restaurants. Of course, that is somewhat dependent upon, what's going to happen from the policymakers, both here in the state of New York, but also at the national level.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So as we wind down, Melissa, how does someone get in touch with you? Anything you want to put out there as we bring this show to an end about the New York State Restaurant Association?
Sure. You can find us on the web at NYSRA for our acronym, New York State Restaurant Association.org. You can email us at info@NYSRA.org, and we would welcome the opportunity to engage with your listeners to better serve the restaurant community.
Thank you. Okay. And Chip, are there any, if someone is interested in upper level management or entry level management, is there some place that they should go or contact for those types of opportunities within your organization?
Sure. I mean, they can go right to our website, right? Union Square, www.ushg.com. And on our website, they can see all of our brands and they'll navigate through some job listings and postings. And if they can't get to that, they can certainly send me an email, right? It's just that simple at cwade@ushg.com.
Wow, my man, it's accessible. Y'all heard that? That's huge right there. Thank you. Any last parting comments from either of you? Anything that we didn't discuss that you wanted to get out there? Any questions for me?
The only thing I would add at this point is I would completely second what Chip was saying about career path and educating yourself and keeping yourself open to understanding the financial side, because I found that to be true even in my career. I'm very tangentially related to the hospitality industry and a trade association that represents them. But, always being willing to say, yeah, I'll try that. Yeah, I'll take that on. I'll learn how to do that. And being able to prove that I could take on a larger leadership role and did, finally master how to run a multi-million-dollar company with the financials.
Absolutely.
Being able to do that really, I think, proved that I was capable and ready to take over as CEO. And I found that to be as true in my career in a nonprofit as it would be in the hospitality industry.
Absolutely. Great information. Absolutely. Chip, any parting words, comments?
Sure, I've got two. One is for our young listeners, Jason.
Yep.
I'm going to insert the phrase or the word courage, right? I mentioned earlier in my opening comments about women, about minorities. I would encourage them all to have courage to raise their hand and say, how can I move forward, right? Don't wait for the opportunities to come to you. Go to your boss, go to your boss's boss. Have the courage to have this frank and candid conversation and let people know that you're interested. So I wanted to close on that point. And then the other thing is I would gladly be part of another session. I know you hinted on that earlier.
Yes.
There's something powerful about fruitful conversations with leaders. And when your listeners get this opportunity to hear from, and I don't have all the answers, right? When your listeners get to hear from a woman CEO and they get to hear from a Black president, and we start this dialogue, it's a powerful thing and it serves to motivate. So sorry for Melissa, I may have put you on the spot, but I'll tell you, Jason, I'll stand up right now and say I'm ready for another session.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Yeah, I threw that out there because I respect your time and your friendship, and obviously I'm very ginger about when I contact you, how I contact you, but every time you've never let me down, and I appreciate that. And same goes for Melissa. Sometimes on a Saturday my brain is going crazy. I'd start texting like. Melissa responds every time, so I truly appreciate both of you. And Chip, I normally hit you up on Sundays, so because I don't know, I feel like that's the best time to really catch you, like early Sunday morning too, like 7 a.m. Yeah. So I really appreciate the both of you for being on my show. Again, tremendous respect and admiration for both of you, and I will definitely try to, we will schedule another session to do a part 2 of this. And for my listeners out there, I want to thank you for tuning in to Hidden Numbers with the Restaurant Scientists, where we meet on the intersection of Opportunity Avenue and Resource Street. And lastly, I'd like to give thanks to my sponsors, Cornerstone Business Labs, Cornerstone Productions, and Cornerstone Media. My name is Jason Wallace. Thank you.